Thank you so much for joining. And apologies that I think we had some technical difficulties where the Zoom update ended up, or the Zoom invite ended up having it look like the webinar was starting at 1 o'clock. So apologies to those of you who may have been waiting for a while for this webinar to start, but really, really appreciate you all joining. I think we're going to give it another minute or two just to let folks trickle in, and then we will get started. Okay, well, why don't we get started? Welcome everyone to our workshop today, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to be able to present to you the pre-proposal application process for round 2 of the Regional Climate Collaboratives program today. My name is Ina Lupin, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the program manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity program, which administers the Regional Climate Collaboratives program. I'll ask our team of note takers and tech support to please introduce themselves via chat as well, and then our speakers will be introducing themselves in a moment when they take over. We'd also love for all of you to introduce yourselves via chat, sharing your name, organization, and the region you work in if you would like. You can post questions in the chat at any time during the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can via chat or during the Q&A portions of the workshop. If you would prefer to ask your question verbally, please feel free to just raise your hand and we'll call on you to speak. We'd like to begin today by acknowledging that this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. As we begin this session, we acknowledge the original inhabitants of our various regions. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. To learn what tribes reside in your community, you can visit nativeland.ca, which I will attempt to drop into the chat. Great, so we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is our agenda for today. We'll start off with Regional Climate Collaboratives program overview. We'll go through application process and some different components of that process. We'll walk through technical assistance and application resources, as well as threshold and scoring criteria. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. We will also be taking Q&A breaks throughout the workshop to keep things interactive and make sure that we answer your questions as we go. Those breaks will be happening on slides that have this little icon of a person with a thought bubble that you'll see here. So you'll kind of see those throughout the presentation. And we actually don't have it in the agenda, but we will have a couple of great demos of our RCC mapping tool and then of the submittable platform, where you'll be putting together your pre-proposal process as well. So you can look forward to that. So we can go to the next slide, please. Great, so on the next slide, I'll be providing a high-level overview of the program. RCC is a capacity building grant program that aims to support cross-sectoral partners in coming together to develop processes, plans, and projects to sustain climate action. As all of you know, I'm sure there are historic levels of funding that are coming down from the federal and state levels to address climate change and fuel a clean energy transition. And RCC is a really timely opportunity to help under-resourced communities across the state and rural communities in particular take advantage of these dollars. So the program seeks to help under-resourced communities access funding to advance place-based and region-wide climate mitigation and resiliency efforts. And we also aim to fund both emerging and established collaboratives across the state. We can go to the next slide, please. Our program has 4 program objectives that should be really central to the goals, priorities, and activities of all collaboratives that are funded through the program. So the first is developing actionable plans and projects. The second is building social infrastructure. The third is centering community engagement and decision-making. And the fourth is developing equity-centered processes. You can go to the next slide. So the eligible applicants for this program include California Native American tribes, community-based organizations and nonprofits, local public agencies, small businesses, and other organizations with a history of providing community-based outreach and technical assistance. Eligible applicants will need to form a regional collaborative partnership structure and will collectively submit one application based on a shared vision. Each collaborative needs to select one managing partner that can demonstrate the organizational capacity to complete projects and the financial capacity to receive and be accountable for the grant. For the full proposal application, applicants will collectively submit a draft partnership agreement that describes the governance and organization of that collaborative partnership structure. That's not required in the pre-proposal, so something to look forward to in the full proposal. And in this round, we won't be requiring that it be signed, which we hope will be more helpful and a little bit easier for folks to put together the application process for round 2. So we can go to the next slide, please. Just a note here that the enabling legislation for the RCC program calls out the importance of diverse partnerships. The program is intended to help communities come together around a whole host of different climate initiatives that span climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. So we really encourage collaboratives to seek partnerships with organizations that are doing different and complementary work so that your collaborative is able to advance a broad range of different climate issues. We have this graphic on this slide that shows an example of some of the issue areas that a collaborative might focus on, but it's definitely not an exhaustive list. There could absolutely be a lot of other pieces here that might be relevant in some way to climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. So really welcome folks' creativity around that. So I will pause here and see if folks have any questions thus far. You'll notice our first little icon of someone deep in thought. So I'll just take a pause and see if anything has come up so far. I'm not seeing any questions so far, so I will pass it over to my colleague Sarah Risher to continue on the presentation. And please feel free to just continue adding comments into the chat, and then we'll be continuing to stop for questions. So don't be shy, but I will pass it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to quickly answer this question. The draft partnership agreement does not need to be signed this round. So hopefully that's good news to folks. And hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Risher. I'm a program analyst on the team, and I will share a bit more about our eligible activities. So our eligible activity section starts on page 9 of the guidelines if you're following along. Our program has a total of 6 eligible activity types or categories. 4 of these are required and 2 of these are optional. Across all of these activities, the goal is that these activities are helping you to strengthen local coordination, leadership, knowledge, skills, expertise, and access to resources in under-resourced communities. So majority of the RCC activities come from our enabling statute, Senate Bill 1072, and they are intentionally broad. So applicants are responsible for describing what these entail for their proposed projects. And the goal here is so you can really tailor your work plan to your local context and what your capacity building needs are across your region. So I'll dive a bit more into each of our activities on the next slide. So activity type 1 encompasses activities that support relationship building, priority identification, plan, and project development. So each of the bullets here are the actual activities we would like to see collaboratives do. These particular bullets are those activities related to relationship building. So that includes collective visioning amongst your collaborative members, supporting partnership development with funders and other entities that are external to your collaborative, and conducting robust community engagement. On the next slide, there's a lot of activities under activity type 1. So this slide here is highlighting those activities that support identifying priorities and developing projects, policies, and plans. And a few to highlight are convening discussions with community members on their needs related to climate change projects, and developing and aligning your community and project plan. So that can include the creation or update of general plans, local hazard mitigation plans, and climate plans that are specifically identifying those community identified multi-benefit projects. And then assisting in the development of local job training and anti-displacement policies and programs. So on the next slide, we'll talk about activity type 2, which encompasses activities that are enabling your collaborative to serve as a technical assistance provider or hub. So really wanting you to be able to support your collaborative members and external entities to help bring resources to your project area. And that includes things such as providing policy, program, and technical expertise to develop and align those multi-benefit projects with potential funding sources, and offering trainings for things like grant application development, project management, implementation, and monitoring. And then on our next slide are our final two mandatory activities. So activity type 3 is project evaluation. So grantees will reserve 3 to 5% of their direct costs within their budget to work with a third-party evaluation technical assistance provider that SGC will provide to grantees. So this budget will allow you to work with that technical assistance provider to measure and communicate your project success. So evaluation activities include creating an evaluation plan and collecting and compiling data into templates that SGC will provide you. And then grantees, the fourth activity type is engaging in peer learning. So grantees will also reserve another 3 to 5% of their total direct cost within their budget to participate in quarterly peer learning sessions that technical assistance provider. Each collaborative will use their set aside for the peer learning to have 2 to 6 representatives to participate in that peer learning. Most of the peer learning is virtual via Zoom, again on a quarterly basis, but we will also bring the collaboratives together for 2 in-person events during the middle and end of the grant term. So next slide, I just quickly highlight the optional activities which we incorporated into the guidelines based off of public feedback during our engagement process when designing this program. And so these two are data collection and analysis. So you can conduct data collection and analysis to help identify existing conditions, community priorities, and the impact of planned projects. You can also carry out education and training for your collaborative members or entities external to your collaborative within your project area that really will help your set your project area up to compete for grants and implement projects into the future. I know I just said a lot, so I kind of want to give you an example of what these activities look like in your work plan. So this comes directly from an application resource we have on our website called example activity tables. So really want to emphasize here that not all activities within each activity type need to be completed to the same degree. It's really how you want to carry out that work. So this is an example of a hypothetical collaborative. One of their activities is to identify funding sources that would improve pedestrian safety and advance active transportation projects in the communities of focus. And then in their work plan, they identify 3 subtasks that help them carry out that activity. So the first is doing a robust community engagement process, and they highlight some examples of what that community engagement could entail. And the purpose of that is to collect data and identify needs to improve the built environment as it relates to pedestrian safety and active transportation. Then the collaborative will take what they learned from that community engagement in subtask number 2 and go seek out funding sources through attending funding fairs or utilizing the state's grant portal to identify, okay, what can we fund? What funding is available for the types of projects we want to do. And then once they identify those funding sources, their subtask 3 is they'll go back to their collaborative and residents and other entities within the region to start scoping out, okay, which are the project or the grant funding opportunities we want to go after, and what are the projects that we've previously discussed that we want to prioritize. And so through this series of subtasks, the activities that the collaborative addresses are there's 4 required. Activity 1A, 1B, 1, so it's easy for you to input it in the work plan. And then they also address an optional activity. And so grantee or applicants will complete a table similar to this in their work plan. So it's an easy way for you to communicate to us how you're achieving the required activities. So with that, I'll go to our next slide to share. We're offering this for the first time. It's an activity waiver request form. We recognize there's a lot of required activities in the program. And so during the pre-proposal phase, applicants can complete what we're calling the activity waiver if they believe that one mandatory activity, either from activity type 1 or activity type 2, is unnecessary or otherwise inappropriate for their proposal. We have information on in Appendix B of the guidelines, I think it's page 31, that details the situations in which maybe a collaborative might feel like an activity wouldn't make sense for them. You can submit this proposal or this request form twice during the pre-proposal. So if you submit it by August 11th, our team will review and provide our response in advance of that pre-proposal date. And if approved, you can submit a pre-proposal and a full proposal that reflects the waived activity. But also you can just submit it with your pre-proposal by September 6th, and then we'll provide you a response, whether that is the activity is omitted with your pre-proposal feedback, and then you can omit it from your full proposal. So I know I just shared a lot, so I'll pause here and see if there's any questions or reactions.
Sarah, there was a question in the chat from Karen. So in the first activity, how is the funding used exactly? Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna scroll up for the first activity type. So this funding can be seen as like paying folks to come to the table to coordinate. So you can actually compensate your staff to host, convenings with your collaborative members or external entities. This could pay staff to do robust community engagement and have kind of set out a strategy of how to collect information from the communities that you'd be serving through the program to get information, really offering the resources to put in the time and effort to kind of do all of those coordination pieces related to that upstream work related to preparing grant applications, identifying funding. I don't know if that answers your question fully, but maybe when I get to actually up next, I'll be talking about the eligible costs. So that might also help with my response.
There's also a question in here around if there is a matching requirement for the program.
That's a great question. There's no matching requirement for the program. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So actually, first I'll tell you about program deliverables. So all of this work will result in the development of 4 key program deliverables. That includes the RCC action plan, which is really to help you do this within the first year of the program of the grant term. It's a 3-year grant term, and really building upon the scope of work and partnership agreement that you submit as part of your application and further refine it and add details. It kind of serves as your roadmap for the work you'll be conducting throughout the grant term. Also, a capacity building toolbox, which compiles the various resources that you create over the course of the RCC grant. And the goal of this is that this serves as a public resource to entities within your region to access these capacity building resources and information on an ongoing basis. The third is a community climate solutions inventory, which is complementary to the capacity building toolbox and compiles the priority plans and projects that the collaborative developed or updated during the grant term, and the projects that you're hoping to seek funding for either during the grant term, the RCC grant term, or after, and you can use it as kind of a communication tool for your priorities. And then the final deliverable is reporting. So with every in-progress report that you would provide in a template.
Sarah, I think you may have cut off for the rest of
that we have for grantees, and then also
Sarah,
annual reports.
I think you cut off for like a few seconds there. Do you mind going over the reporting requirements again? I think Sarah's connection may have paused for a little bit. But while we wait for her to come back online, I can say that the reporting requirements, so once the grantees or awarded applications are under grant agreement and executed, there's going to be administrative requirements such as reporting either monthly to quarterly, and with each report that you submit, you'll also submit an invoice with the summary of what the grant funds that you used in that month or quarter were used for. Sarah, sorry, I think you cut off in reporting.
No worries. I'm so sorry. Thank you for filling in for me there. Okay, maybe hopefully I can stay connected for my final slide, which I think is on costs. So this, what can you fund through RCC? We have 9 eligible costs through the program. They're here on the screen. So you can cover staff time, hire new staff if needed. You can also reserve up to 10% of your budget for consultants who aren't identified at the time of submitting your application, but you want to have some money set aside for to tap into specialized expertise as you carry out your RCC project. You can also reserve up to 15% of your budget to add a new partner, formal partners, into your collaborative partnership structure during the grant term. You can also cover tools, subscriptions, and software. Can cover engagement, outreach, and education and training costs. And I'll flag here that food, childcare, and participation compensation are eligible costs if tied directly to an RCC work product. You can also cover travel cost if for getting around throughout your project area. Peer learning, mentioned that earlier, holding 3 to 5% of your budget for that as well for evaluation. And then you can use up to 30% for your indirect costs. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on the last 2 slides. I'm not seeing any questions come through the chat. Folks are welcome to unmute as well. Okay, maybe Blanca, I'll turn it over to you to get into the nuts and bolts of our application process.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Blanca Escobedo. I'm a program analyst on the case team here at SGC, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm excited to dive into the application process and components with you all. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for this round, we have 2 different funding tracks, one for small grants and one for large grants. And the purpose for these tracks is so that applicants that have a similar award amount can compete within the same funding track and ensure that there's more diversity in terms of scale and scope of the applications that are awarded. So the small grant ranges from $500,000 up to $1 shy away from $1 million. And then the large grants range from $1 million to $1.75 million. And so what we will do when awarding the grants or deciding to recommend awards, we will recommend awards to the 2 highest scoring applications from each funding track. And then with the remaining additional funds, we will award it to the next highest scoring applications that are located in counties that have not yet received an RCC award in either round 1 or round 2, regardless of the award size. So we will not be taking geography into consideration for the first 4 awards within those funding grants, but then with the remaining funds, we will be taking into consideration counties that have been awarded. Next slide, please. So one thing about this program is that we are authorized to use advance pay. So we can distribute up to 25% of the total grant award in advance. So that can be multiple small installments, or it could be one large sum, depending on the applicant's preferences. And collaboratives are able to use advance pay to provide advances to their partners in the collaborative that experience low cash flow. So that will allow them to prioritize the lower capacity partners. And the rest of the total grant award will be dispersed through a reimbursement basis, and we'll have flexibility on monthly to quarterly reporting and invoicing. Next slide, please. So this is our remaining timeline for round 2. Our NOFA and pre-proposal was released earlier this month. You can find the NOFA on our resources page on the SGC website, and we will also be having weekly office hours that started 2 weeks ago until September 6th, and those are on Wednesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. There is a Zoom link where you can register, and I think we'll have that link later in the presentation when we talk about TA. But you'll have to register, and you can register in advance, or you can register right before the meeting at 1 p.m. or throughout that 1 hour meeting. We will also have 2 more workshops next week, another general audience workshop and a tribal communities workshop. And we will have the pre-proposals due September 6th and the full proposals due December 6th. We will be having finalist interviews with the top scoring candidates in January of next year, and then we will make awards and recommend them to council in February of 2024. And the NOFA was just released in the chat. Thank you. So for this round, we will be accepting applications through a platform called Submittable. You can access the direct application through our website. I'll be running through a demo later in the presentation. but I just wanted to make a note that you can make a free account and save your application as you go. And if you do submit your application before the September 6th deadline and you would like to make a change or modification to your proposal, you can send us an email and we can reopen the application for your modification, as long as it's before the September 6th due date. We'll also have more information on the pre-proposal process later in this presentation, but just wanted to let you all know that within Submittable, you'll be able to submit everything except for the activity waiver form, which you'll have to admit through a different form. Next slide, please. So for this program, we're going to maintain both a regional and a place-based component in order for the project area to be eligible, with a slight modification to each. The change to the definition of region is changed in order to increase the flexibility for applicants in order for them to define their own region. So we're not using a county scale as we did in round one, but now applicants can determine their own region based on the definition of shared natural, political, and built environmental systems, climate risks, and/or other shared challenges or dynamics. And however an applicant wants to determine their own regional boundary, the region must be contiguous. However, we will not be funding statewide collaboratives, for example, that range from the north border to the south border. And we actually have a question in the chat: which entities are eligible to apply? And we'll actually, earlier in the presentation, in terms of entities, we had organizations list. And if we want to go back to that real quick, I know we don't have a pause, but we have time to go back a little bit more. Oh, actually, Sarah just dropped it in the chat. But yes, so California Native American tribes, local governments, community-based organizations, nonprofits, small businesses, and regional public agencies. And in our submittable platform, the form, there's, for example, if there's another organization that doesn't meet this list, you can there's an option to put organizations that have a history of working with underrepresented communities, and you'll be able to justify that explanation in there. And I can walk through that in the platform later in the presentation. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so for the community of focus requirement for the project area, a community of focus is a census tract that represents the communities and neighborhoods where the collaborative is going to conduct its place-based work. And a community of focus could be one single census tract, or it could be a cluster of census tracts. That's up to the collaborative to define. And one of the requirements is that the collaborative must serve a minimum of 2 communities of focus. And in order for the communities to be eligible, 75% of the communities of focus must meet our enabling statutes, SB 1072's definition of under-resourced, or 75% of those communities of focus that are under-resourced be 75% or be tribal lands, as long as 50% of the communities of focus meet our enabling statutes definition of under-resourced. And we included our definition of under-resourced in this slide, but you can also refer to it in our guidelines. I will pause here for any, back to the slide, for any questions or reactions to this. Oh, I missed this question from Jessica. We already collaborated with a local tribal nation for conservation work. How do I figure out if we might be eligible to form a collaboration to apply? Does a conservation or land stewardship count? I think biodiversity protection is important for climate features, but it's a little different from, say, installing city-based infrastructure. That's a great question. Thank you, Sarah. So I'll just reiterate what Sarah said in the chat, that you are eligible to apply, and collaboratives can tailor their capacity building work to their needs, and the program is not issue area specific. Thanks, Sarah. Does that answer your question, Jessica? Yeah, and if we ever miss questions in the chat, feel free to come off mute. You're welcome to speak up as well. Is there a map somewhere that might depict under-resource? That is a great question and segue. So I will now pass it to Marky, our colleague who developed the Regional Climate Collaboratives mapping tool, and I'll let her introduce herself and present the mapping tool. Oh, and actually, can we go back to the presentation? And I think there's one slide before the mapping tool.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marky Price, and I'm a program associate for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team. And I'm going to be giving a short overview of the Regional Climate Collaboratives mapping tool. So the purpose of the mapping tool is to help applicants develop their project area maps and determine eligibility. And the project area map should show that the region that the RCC plans on working within and a minimum of 2 communities of focus within that region. And communities of focus are census tracts or tribal area boundaries. And I'm now going to share my screen to the mapping tool. So this is what the mapping tool looks like. It's currently on our website in the resources page. And I think one of my colleagues is going to be dropping the link shortly. But over here to the far left, we have the layer list. And the only layer that's turned on right now is the census tracts and tribal area boundaries layer. And this is what applicants will use to select their communities of focus. And these 4 layers right here are the basis of the under-resourced definition laid out in our guidelines and based on SB 1072. And so they come from the California Environmental Protection Agency, the California Department of Water Resources, and the California Air Resources Board. And applicants don't need to use these or turn these on, but they can if they want to, if you just want to see like where your communities of focus fall based on the different criteria. And the remaining layers represent regional boundaries. These are optional preset regional boundaries that applicants could use to select their region. But again, they're optional. Applicants don't need to use them. And over here on the map in the upper left-hand corner, we have like zoom tools. So applicants could use this to zoom in on the area that they would like to choose their communities of focus and region. Applicants could also use their mouse, or they could use this search bar in the upper right-hand corner if they know the address of where they want their communities of focus and region to be. And then here we have the select tool, and this is what applicants will use to select their communities of focus and their region. And then this is the add data tool, and applicants will use this if they have regional boundaries that may not be here that they would like to use, if they have like shape files or GeoJSON that they would like to add in. And applicants will also use this to add their communities of focus back in once they've selected their communities of focus using the select tool. And this is so applicants could better differentiate between the communities of focus and region. And then applicants will also use the draw tool, which is this right here. And this is if you have a region that is not here in the layer list, or you might not have any boundaries that you have like as a shapefile, you could use this to draw custom boundaries. And then here at the bottom is the communities of focus calculator, and applicants could use this to determine if their communities of focus meet the eligibility requirements in our guidelines. So this orange represents under-resourced census tracts, and this lighter orange represents tribal under-resourced areas. And the reason why they're separated is because tribal areas are not census tracts, but there are still tribal, federally recognized tribal land that is considered under-resourced based on the California Environmental Protection Agency. So we did separate these out so people could differentiate between under-resourced census tracts and under-resourced tribal areas. And then this blue represents not under-resourced census tracts. And then when we were developing the tool, we realized that there are some tribal areas that are not in any of the mapping tools because these mapping tools are imperfect. And so if that's the case, you can follow the 50% under-resourced and the remaining tribal lands eligibility that Blanca mentioned in an earlier slide. You would just have to meet the definition of tribal lands and provide justification for it in your application. So that's the short overview that I'm going to do today. We recently were able to download the mapping tool tutorial video on our website on the resources page. I think one of my colleagues will be dropping the link to that in the chat. And we also have detailed instructions on the same page. So Are there any questions? I'm now going to look at the chat. Oh, thank you guys. I see you guys already put all the links in the chat. Well, I see, Sarah, you answered the question from Elizabeth. It doesn't seem like there's any other questions for now, but I will be in the office hours every Wednesday that Blanca mentioned to answer any questions about the tool. And you can also reach out to our general email at case at sgc.ca.gov for any questions about the mapping tool.
Thank you, Marky. Great overview. And if anyone has any reactions or questions, we'll be happy to address them throughout the presentation or after our presentation as well. We can always go back. Okay, so now for the pre-proposal, we wanted to mention that the purpose of the pre-proposal, which is now required, is to assess applicants and whether they're on track to submit a completed and full application by the end of the application period, because we want applicants to be able to apply to programs that they are going to be competitive in, and that I know applications take a long time, so we want to make sure that you all know where you would be if you submit a full proposal. So the pre-proposal, like I said, is required in order to submit a full proposal. Last round it wasn't required, so just wanted to emphasize that in case people thought that they could submit a full proposal later without submitting one. So just keep the September 6th deadline in mind. And so on submittable, which I'll do an overview in just a second, you'll be able to upload all of those narrative questions and required documents. And all of these components are required in the pre-proposal form. However, they will not be scored. So the narrative responses, the detail of project partners, the work plan, the budget, and the project area map. However, we have simplified them from last round. So hopefully this will give you a good starting point for you to give thought to these components and be able to submit more fully fleshed out ones in the full proposal. So after the September 6th due date, we will provide applicants with qualitative feedback after that and help applicants refine any application components in order for them to best align with the program goals and objectives. Next slide, please. So we will be having a full proposal webinar and presentation later in September, but just wanted to talk about the components of the full proposal in advance so that you all know what's going to be required. So all of the full proposals will be available. All the full proposal materials are going to be available on September 7th after the September 6th pre-proposal due date, and we will also be using submittable for that application submission. All applicants have to meet all of the eligibility requirements upon submission, and we will review the full proposals by SGC staff and also form an interagency review panel. And depending on the number of top scoring applicants, we're going to invite a select amount for finalist interviews in January. So the components of the full proposal require narrative responses that are going to be a little bit more in-depth, a more in-depth workbook that's going to include a detailed work plan, a budget, and a timeline, a project area map that you'll use the mapping tool with, and then submit a unsigned draft partnership agreement, and then letter of authorizations or resolutions for the managing partner and letters of commitment from each partner showing that they're committed to participate in the collaborative and associated activities. Okay, now I will be demonstrating how we can, applicants can make an account on Submittable. So I'm going to screen share for just a sec. Okay. So this is our CC applications materials webpage, and you can get here by going through to programs, click community assistance. That's our team page, and you'll be able to go to the regional climate collaboratives and then click on application materials. And here we have a list of all of our supporting materials and a link to the pre-proposal form. You're going to want to download this Excel spreadsheet, which is where you're going to fill out your draft work plan that you'll upload onto Submittable. So this link is going to take you to Submittable, and I already have an account, but you'll be able to, once you click submit, it'll take you to make a free account. And so once you make your account, you can go to the form. There's instructions for each section, and we highly recommend you all like read carefully through them just so you don't miss any key details and information. So here is the first section where you're going to fill out the managing partner information, your proposal collaborative name, the type of managing partner organization. And like I said earlier in the presentation, these are the eligible entities that are eligible to apply. However, you can also put, if these options don't fall under what your entity organization is, you can select other organizations with a history of providing community-based outreach or technical assistance. And then you'll have to put in a justification as to how you qualify for that. So there's a little bit more information required for the managing partner, just because we want to make sure that the managing partner is able to manage and handle RCC funds and help the collaborative complete its proposed activities. And then it's going to ask you how many total partners you have at this point. In the pre-proposal phase, you don't have to have all of your required partners on board yet. However, for the full proposal, you'll have to have a minimum of 4, including the managing partner. But you can select as many as you'd like, and 14 or more. If you have 14 or more, then I should probably not do this because it's going to expand. But if you have 14 or more, and you can email us and let us know, and we can try to work with you to add that information on the back end. So it's going to ask you the details for all of the partners that you have. And then in section 2, here you have more narrative questions that's going to go into detail on the region and communities of focus. These narrative questions will support your draft project area map. So we'll ask you, please describe your boundary. It's going to ask you why you selected the boundary and why you selected the communities of focus. This is just so that we know more about the demographics, if the population, race, ethnicity, income, or there's other relevant characteristics that come into play when selecting the communities of focus, and how are your activities and proposed work plans are going to address those. And then these are quantitative responses, so you're going to have to include the number of total census tracts selected, and the mapping tool should tell you how many census tracts you selected. And here you'll just submit the total percentage of the under-resourced communities selected in the proposed project area. So it'll either be like 75% or more in order to be eligible. And then here you're going to submit the screenshot of your project area map. So once you're in the mapping tool that Marky went over earlier, you're going to take a screenshot, or you can take a screenshot of the project area map. We just want to, if you have multiple communities of focus scattered throughout your region, we just want to make sure that the communities of focus are clear. So you might have to take multiple screenshots in order for them to be clear for us to see. And you can add at least 10 files, or up to 10 files, apologies. And if you are include tribal lands that are not included in the layer tool that Marky went over earlier, you can just explain how those tribal lands meet our definition, our resource definition. And so this is an optional question if you are going on that path. Here we have more narrative questions. We won't score them in the narrative. We will score, give them a quantitative score, but just this should help you launch a full proposal responses. And then for the draft budget and work plan, the draft budget is pretty simple for the pre-proposal phase. You're going to have to select which tract you're applying under. And then here you're going to list your partners that you have so far, and the budget, estimated budget that each partner will have from the total grant award. And then here you're going to have to put, like, these can be estimates for now. And actually after the pre-proposal phase, we can give you more feedback and you'll be able to work directly with TA providers to refine that in the full proposal. And the full proposal will have a more detailed budget, but it is more streamlined than last round. And here you're just going to provide justification as to why you allocated a certain amount to partners, staff costs, and all the other required cost categories. And in the work plan, this is where you're going to upload your Excel workbook. That Excel workbook has a sheet where you'll be able to fill in your tasks and subtasks and how those tasks and subtasks will address the mandatory and optional activities. And there's more information here on how you can find more information on how those activities are going to, how you'll be able to address those activities. Are there any questions on submittable or any reactions? I can't see the full chat, so I'll stop screen sharing.
I don't see any questions in the chat. So folks can feel free to also just come off mute with any questions you may have.
I'll just say that we hope that submittable is like a more streamlined and easier option for applicants to use this go around, and that you'll be able to go back in and collaborate with your other collaborative partners and work in the same form together. And you'll also get a confirmation email after it's submitted so that you know when it's submitted, and we'll be able to provide direct feedback after our review within that form as well. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I can launch back into the presentation. Thank you, Cynthia. So now I'm going to share a little bit more on the support and the resources that we'll have available this round. So we have 2 more workshops next week, the general audience and tribal communities workshops. If you're interested in joining, they're going to be pretty similar, but it's another opportunity to ask questions and see if other attendees and participants have questions as well. The Zoom registration links are going to be in the chat as well. Okay, next slide, please. So we have our technical assistance team on board to provide direct application support this round. The technical assistance team is comprised of Estelano Advisors, California Coalition for Rural Housing, Institute for Local Government, and Better World Group. And I will actually pause here and let Roberto Torres introduce himself on behalf of Institute for Local Government, one of our TA.
Thank you, Blanca, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roberto Carlos Torres. My pronouns are he, him, él, and leading the team here on behalf of the Institute for Local Government, who's one of 4 technical assistance providers. And so just here to introduce ourselves, I'm joined by my colleague, Nikita Sinha, who's also with ILG, and Seth Young. They're both my colleagues here who will be assisting. Once the pre-proposals are submitted, you get assigned a TA provider, and we'll be one of those for some of the folks who submit.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roberto. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit more about TA and its offerings for the pre-proposal and the full proposal. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have office hours every Wednesday from 1 to 2. And if you are a round 1 applicant and you specifically are rural or tribal applicant with a high number of under-resourced communities, we will prioritize you for consultation service calls with our TA members, the TA member that you worked with in round 1. So if you didn't fill out an intake form earlier this year, you can email us in our case email, and we will send you that intake form and connect you with the TA team. And like Roberto said earlier, after the pre-proposal phase, or even now too, during the office hours. The TA team is available for general support, emailing them questions or flagging any issues about the program or concerns. And then after the pre-proposal phase, thank you, Abigail. After the full proposal phase, or after the pre-proposal phase, in the full proposal phase, there's too many similar words there. The TA team will be able to support with mapping, developing your budget and work plan, developing your collaborative partnership structure, coordinating your application. They'll be able to review your narrative responses and help you with an interview if you're selected for an interview. Okay, next slide, please. We also have developed several application resources that you can use when filling out your application. It's available on our resources page, and we'll drop that in the chat. We also have templates, for example, for the required application materials, such as templates for managing partner resolution. If your managing partner is a tribe, there's one for a tribe as well, and then there's a template for letter of authorization and letter of commitment, and of course the partnership agreement, which is can be unsigned. And so these are templates that you can modify if necessary, and add additional information if you would like, but they can just be a starting point. We also have guidance documents available, such as project area guidance to help you select your region and communities of focus, and also a mapping tool, and the mapping tool instructions and videos. And also, the example activity table that Sarah went over, a collective impact resources that has different links to other different collaborative examples. And then we have our full application instructions on there as well. I see we have a question from Eric. Are we able to find all these links somewhere? Yes. I will link it in the chat. Thank you. And if you have a specific question about one of these templates or resources, you can review it now, and you can of course ask later in the presentation after you've had a chance to review. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so so now we're going to share a little bit more about our threshold and scoring criteria. Next slide, please. So the threshold criteria will be applied to the full proposal, not the pre-proposal, but we think it's a really good idea for applicants to look at it now, just so that they can be prepared for the full proposal and know what we will be looking for to assess eligibility. So we're looking for general completeness, that all the materials on submittable are completed and you've uploaded all the required documents, and that your funding amount requested will fall under the funding tract award range. So just make sure that when you're filling out the budget, that you're not going above or below the funding amount. So yeah. And we also are looking for all applicants to be eligible, specifically the managing partner to be one of those options that I went over in submittable earlier. And also that the managing partner is able to provide any appropriate documentation and justification confirming their ability to apply for and to receive RCC funds if they're awarded. So it'd be really great to see evidence and justification of how the managing partner has maybe handled similar grants or programs before in the past. And of course, for all other partners to be eligible as well. And so for the project area, that the region is contiguous, it's not statewide, and that it's focuses on a region that you are able to illustrate in the draft or in the project area map, and that at least 75% of the communities of focus that you identified are under-resourced according to the criteria we went over before, and that you have at least a minimum of 2 census tracts. Next slide. So here we have a point breakdown of all the different application components for the full proposal. So again, these points won't be assessed in the pre-proposal, only in the full proposal. But it's good to look at what you should focus on, all of them, but specifically we will be looking for the applicants to clearly communicate what their project need and region is, how your program proposal is going to advance our program objectives or for program objectives. And we really want a clear justification or description of why partners came together for this opportunity. If it's an emerging collaborative, how you're all going to work together and why it makes sense. And if you're an established collaborative, what have you done in the past? What programs and activities have you done in the past that is relevant to our CC? And yeah, of course, the interview component point allocation is new to this round. So that's the 10 additional points after the 150 baseline points. Okay. Now I can turn it. Oh, actually, we have one more slide. Apologies. We wanted to share a little bit more about round one awardees. We awarded 6 grants in December of last year, and all of these awarded applications are helping different under-resourced communities across the state do capacity building activities and also do different activities to access other grant funding for their climate change projects. So wanted to highlight a couple. So we have tribal-led and tribal partners involved in these collaboratives, but we also have very diverse applicants that were able to help and participate within RCC. Specifically, Siskiyou Climate Collaborative is based in the North State, and they are a rural applicant. And we can learn more about their application on the website. You can view their specific profile. And I also wanted to mention that our TA team will also be able to share some examples of these grantee applications from last year, so that you can take a look at what some of their responses were and like what it looks like to be a successful collaborative, or not what it looks like, but some of the collaboratives that we selected. Okay, now I will pass it to Ina for Q&A.
Neat. Thank you, Blanca.
We actually have a question here that might be helpful if Marky can screen share the mapping tool quickly.
Okay, I'll share my screen. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So Chantalise was wondering about the pie chart and the colors of the pie chart and like getting the certain colors to show up. So what you would do, for example, like let's say I wanted to focus on this Fresno area, I would open the select tool and I would drag my mouse over the communities of focus that I would like to use. And then I would look at the pie chart and that would tell me based on like my selection, the percentage that are under-resourced census tracts versus not under-resourced. And so you could also hold down Shift and drag your mouse over other census tracts that are not contiguous. So that's how you would change the different colors on the pie chart. I hope that makes sense. I hope I answered your question.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Marky.
thank you.
Yeah, I always feel like it's a lot easier to kind of look at the tool for questions like this. That's a great question.
Chantalise, I think you went off mute for a second. Is that correct?
Yes, I was just saying, yes, that was helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Looking through the chat here, I know we responded to some questions via chat earlier, and so if there are any additional questions, I know Elizabeth, you had a question about like sensors for a watershed. I think Sarah did a good job of kind of providing a really thorough response, but if there are additional questions related to that piece, we could definitely talk through them, as well as if anyone else wanted to revisit their questions in the chat. Okay. Well, we do still have a pretty good amount of time, almost a half an hour left on the webinar. And so we can stick around for a little bit longer too, to just see if questions come up. But if it seems to get to a point where we haven't heard questions in a while, we might close. One thing to note as well is we do have additional workshops that are coming up that folks should definitely take advantage of if that would be helpful for you, or also to like spread the word if you have other partners that may be interested in the program but weren't able to join the workshop today. So maybe we can add the dates for those into the chat. You can find the registration on our website. See if I can pull those up. And then, as I think we've mentioned a ton of times throughout this webinar, you can always feel free to send us an email at case@sgc.ca.gov if you have any questions. And then, of course, Blanca just dropped into the chat as well the office hours registration, which is also a great opportunity to connect directly with program staff, ask us questions, and then also connect with our TA providers through those as well. So definitely, if you're thinking about applying to the program, would highly recommend joining those office hours with any questions that might be coming up for you. Great.
We will be posting the recording on our SGC website and YouTube page. And then there's already a recording of our webinar from last week.
But we can send that link once it's up to all registrants and participants, so you know it's ready for viewing. I think one other thing about office hours, I really appreciated Elizabeth's question, and office hours are a good time to ask those types of questions as well, really specific. This is the idea that I have in my head, does this align? And you could put in a breakout room to have like a one-on-one discussion with the TA provider, or sometimes our office hours are like a big group discussion where all attendees are just getting on the same page around program requirements. So we have a lot of flexibility in how we can address questions through office hours.
Yeah. And Mark, you will also be joining office hours to walk folks through the mapping tool as needed. So if questions are coming up there, as we mentioned, there's a great tutorial that's up online, both a video tutorial and then written instructions, which are like really thorough and great, I think, for work kind of creating your map. But we'll also have these office hours where you can kind of troubleshoot if you're running into any issues. So hopefully that will be helpful as well. Yeah, not seeing any other questions. So potentially we can close a little bit early today, and then again, just really welcome folks to reach out to us and continue engaging through office hours, workshops, all the things we have planned. But really appreciate all of your time today and sitting through all of the description of our program and how it works. So
I have one quick question. Sorry, I know you're trying to close and people probably want to go. I just was wondering about the submittable. I'm not sure what the exact term is for submitting the documents. So if I understand, multiple partner applicants can use or in your collaborative, multiple people can access the portal. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay.
yes.
I guess once I get in there, it'll be more evident how that works. And that's a great addition, by the way.
Yeah, we're really excited about this platform. It's much more high tech than what we had last round. So I think it'll be a lot easier to use. And Blanca, do you have on hand by chance the instructions around that? If not, we can always like follow up later with how that works. I believe that you can, like the person who creates the submittable account is the only one who can actually submit the application, but others can access it and have, review and I believe editing privileges as well.
Yes, I need to find those, but I can send them, we can send them to everyone on this call later once I found them. But yeah, the one who creates the original form does have to submit it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Right. Does that spark any last minute questions for anyone? Or should we close for the day? Okay. I'm going to call it, but thanks so much.